Carl Jung said that. And if you've ever felt like the way you think doesn't quite fit what the world expects, then maybe you already get what he meant. Maybe you've been told to be more logical when you naturally lead with emotion. Or maybe you've been called too sensitive when, to you, it just feels like you're noticing meaning where others see nothing at all. Right now, whether you're aware of it or not, your mind is running on a specific mode. A way of thinking that shapes how you make decisions, how you solve problems, how you relate to others, and how you move through the world. Carl Jung believed that each of us tends to lean toward one of 4 basic ways of seeing reality. He called them personality functions. And if you've ever felt like something was off or that you're living slightly out of sync with yourself, this might be why. So, what are these 4 types? Thinkers. They lead with logic, rational, structured, and guided by facts. Feelers. Emotional and values. Driven. They care deeply about relationships, meaning, and harmony. Sensors. Grounded in reality, practical, detail, oriented, and tuned into the here and now. Intuitives. The visionaries. Always scanning the horizon for what could be obsessed with patterns, ideas, and possibilities. Now, you might think you already know which one you are. But here's a twist. What if the way you've been living doesn't actually reflect your true type? What if you've been pushed since childhood into being someone you're not? Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're shaped. Parents, teachers, society, all of them nudging us toward certain behaviors, encouraging some traits, discouraging others. If you were naturally logical, maybe they told you to be more in touch with your emotions. If you were emotional, maybe you heard, stop being so sensitive. If you were imaginative, they may have called you a daydreamer. If you were practical, maybe they said you were too rigid. Little by little, we're molded into a version of ourselves that's acceptable to the world. But what if that version isn't true to who you actually are? Jung believed that most people never stop to question the lens through which they see reality. They just assume their way of thinking is normal, when in fact it might be distorted by years of conditioning. Understanding your dominant personality function isn't just a cute self-discovery trick, it's power. Because once you know how your mind works, what drives it, what drains it, you can stop fighting yourself and start living in alignment. But here's the part people don't talk about enough. Your dominant function is just the beginning. It's only one part of your inner framework. Beneath it, in the layers of your unconscious, lies something even more important. Something that might explain why, no matter how hard you try, a part of you always feels like it's missing. And that's where this journey starts. Before we dive deeper into the 4 main personality functions, there's a bigger distinction Jung pointed to something foundational. It's the way we direct our mental energy, introversion versus extraversion. Now, in today's world, those 2 words are completely misunderstood. Most people think being introverted means you're shy and quiet, while being extroverted means you're loud and social. But Jung meant something very different. In Jung's terms, introversion is about focusing inward in thoughts, feelings, memories, and internal reflection. Extroversion is about directing your attention outward toward people, activity, and the external world. An introvert might love people, but they recharge by being alone. An extrovert might enjoy alone time, but they get energized by being around others. Neither one is better. They're just different ways of relating to the world. And here's where it gets interesting. Introversion and extroversion aren't just about energy. They influence how you use the 4 core functions of personality thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. So in Jung's model, each function can show up in 2 ways. Internally focused, introverted. Externally focused, extroverted. Which gives us 8 total ways of processing reality. And these 8 types, when fully understood, create a powerful map of your inner world. Let's break them down. 1. Extroverted thinking. These are your system builders. They organize the external world through logic, structure, and measurable outcomes. Their minds work like engineers, sufficient, strategic, and goal-oriented. They make decisions based on what works, what's proven, what gets results, but their focus on logic can make them seem cold or dismissive of emotional nuance. Their strength, making things run smoothly. Their blind spot, overlooking the human cost of that efficiency. 2. Introverted thinking. Here, logic happens behind the scenes. These thinkers are internal processors, quietly questioning, refining, and analyzing. They don't just apply logic, they want to understand it at the deepest level. They break ideas down, strip away assumptions, and search for internal consistency. But because they spend so much time in their heads, they can feel disconnected from the world around them. Their insights are powerful, but hard to communicate. 3. Extroverted feeling. This type is all about connection. They read emotional cues like second nature, always aware of the vibe in a room, knowing what to say to make others feel comfortable or included. They're deeply attuned to social dynamics and often prioritize harmony over personal preference. But the downside? They can lose themselves trying to please others, always molding to expectations, forgetting their own needs. 4. Introverted feeling. These people are guided by internal values and a personal moral compass. They don't care about what's popular or socially accepted. They care about what feels deeply right to them. They often create art, movements, or philosophies rooted in authenticity, but their conviction can feel isolating. If the world doesn't reflect their inner truth, they may retreat, feeling misunderstood or alone. 5. Extroverted sensation. These are the doers. Action-oriented, present-focused, and totally in tune with their environment. They experience the world in vivid detail, every sound, every taste, every texture, fully absorbed. They're great in fast-paced situations that require quick responses, but their challenge, long-term planning, they can get caught in chasing the next thrill, rarely pausing to ask, where is this leading? 6. Introverted sensation. These types operate through memory and familiarity. They trust what they've experienced before what's been tested, what's proven to work. They have incredible recall for detail and often find comfort in structure and tradition, but they may resist change or get stuck in nostalgia, clinging to the past even when the future calls. 7. Extroverted intuition. This is the energy of endless ideas. Visionaries who connect dots others don't even see, always exploring, always imagining what could be. They thrive in brainstorming and discovery, but their gift for ideas can turn into chaos if they don't learn to follow through. Starting is easy, finishing, not so much. 8. Introverted intuition. This function works beneath the surface. These individuals process patterns subconsciously, often arriving at sudden aha moments that seem to come from nowhere, but are the result of long, quiet observation. They have deep insight and often sense the direction of things before anyone else does. But because their thinking is so internal, they can struggle to explain or feel misunderstood when others can't follow their leaps of insight. Each of these 8 types reflects a unique way of experiencing the world, and no one is just one function. We all have a hierarchy of dominant function, a supporting one, a background one, and one that's deeply buried in the unconscious. And that last one, the one you barely recognize, that's where we're going next. So now that you've seen how these 8 personality types show up in the world, the question becomes, which one is yours? Are you leading with logic or emotion? Focused on the present or dreaming of the future? Are you energized by the outer world, or does your inner world run the show? More importantly, are you sure? Because here's the thing most people miss. Your dominant function, the part of your mind that feels most natural, is only one piece of the puzzle. There are other parts of your personality quietly influencing your thoughts and behavior in the background. Some of them support your strengths. Others, they challenge them. Carl Jung believed that the human personality isn't flat. It's layered. It's not just about your dominant trait, but how the rest of your mental functions fall into place around it. And these functions form a kind of psychological hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy is your dominant function, your main operating system. It's the mental process you rely on the most, often without even realizing it. It shows up early in life and becomes the lens through which you interpret just about everything. A thinker will naturally analyze. A feeler will tune into emotional currents. A sensor will notice real-world details. And an intuitive will gravitate toward possibility and meaning. But that's just the surface, because no one lives life through a single lens. Your auxiliary function is like your second in command. It balances your dominant function, offering a kind of counterweight. Think of it as the supporting role in your psychological movie. It might not lead the way, but it keeps the story grounded. For example, if you lead with thinking, you might have feeling as your auxiliary. That means logic is your go-to, but you also have an internal check-in. How is this going to affect people? Or maybe you're an intuitive who's always lost in big ideas, but your auxiliary sensation function helps you occasionally return to earth and take care of practical stuff. The balance between these two, the dominant and auxiliary, can determine how well you navigate the world. When they're in sync, things flow. But when they're out of balance, that's when life starts to feel off. Then comes the tertiary function. This one is a little trickier. It's not your natural strength, but it's not buried either. It kind of lingers in the background, sometimes showing up when you're relaxed or in certain stages of life. It's like a side character in your story, still part of the plot, but not driving it. Sometimes people become more aware of their tertiary function as they mature. A dominant logical type might start tapping into their creativity or intuition more in their 30s or 40s. It's subtle, but it adds depth to who you are. And finally, we get to the most mysterious one, the inferior function. This is the side of you that's often unconscious. It's the part of your mind you don't fully understand. It feels foreign, awkward even, threatening at times. It shows up in moments of stress, confusion, or emotional overwhelm. Let's say you're a dominant thinker. Logic comes easy. You're great at staying calm, solving problems, making rational decisions. But then something emotional hits you out of nowhere, a breakup, a betrayal, a deep personal failure, and suddenly, you're not calm anymore. You're overwhelmed, unprepared, and confused. That's your inferior function. For the thinker, it might be feeling. For the intuitive, it could be sensation. For the feeler, it might be thinking. Whatever it is, it's usually the exact opposite of your dominant trait. And here's the twist. The inferior function, your greatest weakness, might actually be the key to your growth. Jung believed that the path to wholeness doesn't come from doubling down on what you're already good at. It comes from integrating the part of you that you've rejected, ignored, or suppressed. He called this process individuation. And it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming fully yourself. Because the truth is, your strengths can only take you so far. If you rely on them too much, they can actually become limitations. A logical person who avoids emotion might become disconnected and rigid. An emotional person who ignores logic might struggle with boundaries. An intuitive who can't stay present might feel lost in their own head. A sensor who fears change might stay stuck in the past. It's not about fixing who you are, it's about expanding who you are. Let's take a real-world example. Say you're a dominant intuitive. You love ideas, patterns, possibilities. You're drawn to big-picture thinking, but then life throws you into a job that requires detailed planning and following exact procedures, something that relies heavily on sensory awareness. At first, it might feel like torture. Every instinct in you wants to jump ahead, make connections, innovate. But now you're forced to slow down, focus, follow steps. It's frustrating, but it's also a growth opportunity. Because if you can learn to access your inferior function sensation, in this case, you start to round yourself out. You become not just a visionary, but someone who can execute those visions. And the same goes for any function. If you're a dominant feeler, Maybe logic feels cold and unnatural, but developing your thinking side can help you make clearer, more objective decisions. If you're a sensor who thrives on tradition and routine, leaning into intuition can help you imagine possibilities you'd otherwise miss. This is the heart of individuation, recognizing that every function, every part of your mind has value, even the ones you don't like, especially the ones you don't like. In Jung's view, the unconscious isn't just a dark, mysterious force, it's a mirror. It reflects the parts of yourself that you've rejected. And by facing those parts, by integrating what's been hiding in the shadows, you don't become someone new. You become someone whole. But of course, the unconscious doesn't go down without a fight. It shows up as discomfort, as resistance, as self-sabotage. You might notice it in those recurring patterns you can't seem to break. In the parts of life where you always seem to struggle, those areas aren't random, they're clues. They point to the functions you've been avoiding. And the more you ignore them, the more chaos they cause. But the moment you start to pay attention, that's when things shift. You begin to notice that the situations that used to trigger you don't hit quite as hard, that the things you used to avoid now seem manageable, that the people you once judged harshly start to make more sense. You don't just understand yourself, you begin to understand others too. Because once you recognize your own dominant and inferior functions, you start to see them in everyone else. And suddenly, conflicts that once felt personal just look like mismatched wiring. That's the real power of Jung's model. It's not about putting people in boxes. It's about understanding how people see the world so you can better connect with them and with yourself. So now you understand the functions. You know your dominant one, the way you naturally operate. You know there's a supporting function, keeping things in balance. And you know there are those buried parts of yourself, the ones you tend to ignore. But that carries some of your greatest potential. But here's where things get even more interesting. Carl Jung believed that the parts of yourself you avoid don't just disappear. They form what he called the shadow. The shadow is made up of everything you've pushed out of conscious awareness, traits you've denied, emotions you've suppressed, behaviors you've been taught are unacceptable. It's the anger you were told to hide, the ambition you were told was selfish, the sensitivity you were told to toughen up. And over time, these things don't go away, they go underground. The shadow isn't always obvious. It doesn't scream for your attention. But it leaks out in subtle, and sometimes destructive ways. In self-sabotage, in resentment. In those moments where your reaction feels way too intense for the situation, have you ever met someone who instantly annoyed you, but you couldn't explain why? That might be your shadow talking. Often, the qualities we dislike most in others are the ones we've disowned in ourselves. It's not that they don't exist in you, it's that you've buried them so deep you can't see them until someone else reflects them back. Jung didn't believe the shadow was bad. He believed it was necessary. The goal isn't to destroy it, it's to understand it. Because when you bring your shadow into awareness, you stop letting it control you from the background. That's where true transformation happens. When you confront the parts of yourself you've rejected, you become more whole. You stop living a fragmented life, one part accepted, the rest hidden, and you start becoming integrated. Now let's bring this all back to the practical side of life. Understanding these personality functions isn't just theory. It can change the way you approach relationships, your career, conflict, decision-making, everything. Take relationships, for example. Imagine a dominant thinker and a dominant feeler trying to communicate. One relies on logic and detachment. The other needs emotional connection. The thinker might feel like the feeler is being irrational, while the feeler might see the thinker as cold. But once they both understand how the other processes the world, something shifts. The thinker starts to value the emotional context. The feeler realizes logic isn't a rejection of emotion. It's just another way of navigating experience. Or consider career choices. Let's say someone is a dominant, extroverted sensor. They thrive in fast-paced environments, grounded in action and real-world engagement. But somehow, they ended up in a job that's slow, abstract, and heavy on theory. They start to feel bored, drained, even stuck, not because they're lazy or incapable, but because the job doesn't align with how their mind is wired. Once they understand that, they can pivot towards something that energizes them instead of exhausting them. This is the kind of clarity Jung's framework can offer. Even in problem solving, it makes a difference. Extroverted thinkers break things down step by step using external facts. Introverted thinkers reflect deeply and question assumptions. Intuitives look for patterns and possibilities, seeing beyond the obvious. Sensors stay grounded in immediate, practical results. None of these is better than the others. They're just different approaches. And when you understand your style, you can stop comparing yourself to others who operate completely differently. You can start building systems and routines that work for you. This is the power of self-awareness. You stop trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit. You stop judging others for not thinking the way you do. And most importantly, you start making decisions from a place that feels authentic. Not reactive, not conditioned, real. Now, you've probably heard of the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It was inspired by Jung's ideas, but changed quite a bit from his original theory. MBTI gives you a 4-letter code like INTJ or ESFP and categorizes you into one of 16 personality types. It's useful in some ways, but a lot of people take it the wrong way. They treat personality types like labels, like permanent boxes that define what you can and can't do, but that's not what Jung believed at all. In his view, personality isn't fixed. It's fluid. You don't find your type and then stay locked into it forever. You grow into it. You develop new functions. You expand the way you think, feel, sense, and intuit. That's the real journey. It's not about saying, I'm a thinker, so I don't do feelings, or I'm an introvert, so I can't lead. It's about understanding your core tendencies and recognizing where you can grow. Jung's theory invites you to stop living as only a part of yourself, and instead to become more fully you. So let's bring it full circle. Who are you? Not the version of you that was shaped by other people's expectations. Not the role you've been playing because you thought you had to. Not just your strengths, or the parts of you that get approval. Who are you beneath all of that? That's the question individuation asks, and it doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't tell you how to act or who to be. It asks you to look inward, to get uncomfortable, to uncover the full range of who you are: logic and emotion, discipline and chaos, strength and vulnerability. This isn't about self-improvement. It's about self-realization. And it's not quick. The mind resists change. The world rewards conformity. But individuation doesn't care about any of that. It cares about wholeness. People who go through this process don't just become better versions of themselves. They become realer versions of themselves. Clearer, freer, more alive. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And most people never reach that point. They follow expectations. They suppress their instincts. They ignore the deeper parts of themselves. They live as fragments. But you don't have to. Individuation isn't reserved for scholars or philosophers. It's available to anyone, including you, if you're willing to look inward and be honest with what you find. So, if this video has made you question the way you think, if it's made you wonder what part of yourself you've been ignoring, then you've already begun the journey. And if you want to go further, start exploring. Read Jung's psychological types, dive into Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, look into Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. These are thinkers who asked the same questions and found wildly different answers. Because ultimately, this isn't about finding the right personality. It's about uncovering your truth. Your personality isn't one function. It's not one way of thinking. It's not a fixed label or a 4-letter code. It's a complex, evolving structurea, mix of conscious choices and unconscious influences of strengths and shadows. Jung's work reminds us true growth comes not from choosing between logic or emotion, intuition or structure, but by learning to embrace all parts of yourself, even the uncomfortable ones, even the ones you've never met before. So I'll leave you with one last question.